Joining me now to discuss what we can expect as we look ahead to upcoming economic impacts as Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So $7 for butter. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was the top issue, and we knew that all along. All along, voters were saying the economy was number one. Economy and inflation, which effectively can be said in the same breath, of course. That was the number one issue motivating voters. And we saw all the polls say that Trump was more trusted on economic issues than Kamala Harris. And if we look at that, and it's always easy to look at things in hindsight here, but if we look at that, it's not so surprising that when these swing states started to tip, they started to tip to Donald Trump instead of Kamala Harris. And I think that's why he had a big electoral win. Now he's got to roll up his sleeves and actually fix the economy and get prices back to where they were before the pandemic. And that is a massive, massive task.
It is a massive undertaking, but some of the impacts that I've been most concerned about, mortgage interest rates, cost to borrow for a vehicle, and then, of course, the cost of food, a couple of those have already been addressed. You have Fed Chair Jerome Powell lowering interest rates immediately after the announcement that President Trump had been reelected. You also have the kind of, it's a push and pull, obviously, but there's this feeling that things are going to be reset back to standard working order. So you're running an organization, National Taxpayers Union. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is up for renewal. I hate that. I hate that it wasn't permanent tax cuts. Will they be permanent this time?
I don't think they will be permanent. Unfortunately, there are really tricky rules that you have to overcome, particularly in the United States Senate. We have the filibuster 60 vote requirement to effectively make tax policy permanent by and large. And we're going to have a Republican majority in the Senate of maybe 53 or so seats. So they're going to have to use this arcane process called reconciliation that limits what you can do with tax policy. And that's really unfortunate because it probably means that we're going to get 6 or 7 or so years of good tax policy. And then we'll have to hope and pray that we have a Congress and a president down the road that shares our views that taxes should be low and fair and designed to encourage growth and family creation and all the other things that we want to see.
So it's such a problem because permanent tax cuts free up businesses to make long-term plans. Most businesses plan in 5-year cycles. They do strategic planning, and then they have even other things that they engage in depending on the size and scope of the business. It's difficult to plan long-term if you know that the taxes you're operating under are going to expire in 4 or 5 years.
That's correct, 100% correct. And that was why it was good that one of the permanent things that came out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was the corporate rate dropping down to 21%. That was arguably the most pro-growth provision within that entire bill. And because it was permanent, you're right, corporations, large businesses could plan and make decisions accordingly. That's why we saw a lot of growth and a lot of job creation, all the things, again, that we wanted to see from the tax reform process. Unfortunately, the small businesses out there, the pass-through entities, the 20% deduction that they got, really good for them, but that was more of a short-term boost. And that's why it's really incumbent that we provide small businesses, as well as families, of course, but small businesses tax relief in this next go-around as we tackle tax reform again in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because President Obama emerged late in the campaign cycle for 2024 and began to take credit for the economic boom that occurred during the Trump administration. He said that after 8 years of good policy under his leadership, it was inevitable that President Trump would experience a boom in the U.S. economy, and that it was actually due to his policy. Like, he took total credit for it. I'm pretty sure that that's not the way it works, but you are an expert here. So you tell us, all of us viewers, everybody, is that how it works?
Yeah, not so much. I mean, there's certainly a lag effect to some of these policies. You implement policies and it takes a while for them to actually kick in. They have to go through the regulatory process, getting the rules in place. So there is a lag effect, but no, I don't think Obama deserves that much credit for the economic boom that we saw in 2018 and 2019. Quite coincidentally, it happened to line up with a time when we were deregulating a lot of the things that Obama did, undoing a lot of the policies that he put into place. And most importantly, as we've touched on already, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, getting our tax code internationally competitive. We had a rate that was far higher than most of our competitors abroad. That really hurt businesses here. And it was one of the reasons why corporations were looking for the exits. They were heading overseas to move their operations, their headquarters, and so forth. And once we started lowering their taxes, deregulating, we saw the opposite effect. People creating jobs, making investments on American soil. That's why we saw the big economic boom. And I think we can get there again if we roll up our sleeves and address tax policy in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. And then I actually did some research the week before last on the regulatory impact on businesses. Heritage has some deep dive papers over there that outline actually it's not just 11,000 plus dollars per American in extra regulatory impacts from the Biden administration, and those are their 2022 calculations. But there's also over $150 billion a year that US businesses have to absorb as a part of their operating costs due to additional regulations from the Biden administration. So having an anti-regulation presidency could save billions of dollars, and that money could go into investment and further expansion and growth, which would help the GDP and also help Americans with their wages.
That's 100% correct. When we start talking about regulatory relief, particularly for small businesses, that gets passed down to workers because they can raise their wages. It gets passed down to consumers because they can lower the prices. Same is true for tax costs, regulatory costs. We want to make it as cheap as possible to operate a business, to start a business, to innovate, to live the American dream here. And I think driving down those regulatory costs, having better tax policy, energy costs, we haven't even touched on that. Energy costs far too high. Not doesn't just hurt those homeowners who can't afford to run their air conditioning in the summer and their heat in the winter. It also affects businesses. Our manufacturers in particular are very reliant on energy inputs. When energy prices go up, that really hits their bottom line. It makes it harder for them to keep prices low. It creates inflation. So if we can drive down all of these costs for our businesses, we can not only make the United States more competitive globally, but we can also improve the inflation nightmare that we've been suffering through for many years now.
I think that's very important, and every single one of us has to have an attitude of support for that kind of policy, as opposed to saying that we want some other nebulous thing. We should just drill down on what actually helps Americans. National Taxpayers Union is an amazing organization. Give everyone the website.
NTU.org.
NTU.org. Brandon Arnold, Executive VP over there. So great to have you. Have a great weekend.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.